weekdays at noon on the Fox News Channel.
Brand new hour, new details now in the search for a Secretary of State who's going to get the job. Some lesser-known names are now gaining traction, and other known people, perhaps not so much. It's a brand new hour of America's Newsroom. It's Friday. It's right in the middle of the holiday season, and hope you're having a great day. I'm Bill Hemmer. Welcome here as Martha has a day off today. How you doing?
That's right. How could you not have a great day? It's Friday.
Correct.
It's Friday. We love that. I'm Melissa Francis. I'm in today for Martha McCallum, and sources telling us that Exxon CEO Rex Tillerson now looking like a real contender, as previous names are still in the mix, but apparently falling down the short list a bit.
So now a new name is starting to make the rounds. Alan Mulally, CEO of Ford. Meanwhile, at a rally last night in Iowa, Mr. Trump talked about the search for America's top diplomat and framed it this way.
In filling my cabinet, I'm looking for people who fully understand the meaning of service and who are committed to advancing the common good. I believe we're in the process of putting together one of the great cabinets that has ever been assembled in the history of our nation. Do you like it so far, everybody?
He's never one for hyperbole. Jennifer Griffin is live in Washington with more on this. Jennifer, what's the latest?
Hi, Melissa. Well, I spoke to a source close to the president-elect, and here's what I'm told. I'm told that ExxonMobil CEO Rex Tillerson, who met with Donald Trump on Tuesday, his stock is rising. I'm told that he has been invited back for another meeting with the president-elect in the coming days. He is an appealing pick for Donald Trump because he has run a multi-million-dollar business with a presence in 50 countries worldwide. He has had to negotiate deals in war-torn Yemen and has close ties to Russian President Vladimir Putin, dating back to the Boris Yeltsin era. Former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani, I'm told, is in, quote, hot water with Trump, despite having been one of his most loyal supporters and closest allies, after publicly pitching himself as the best pick for Secretary of State, most recently at a Wall Street Journal business meeting in November. I'm told he could have had DHS, Department of Homeland Security. He has not been seen coming in or out of Trump Tower for the past 2 weeks. Then there's Mitt Romney. He's still a top contender, but there are still those around Trump who feel that the speech he gave in March outlining why Trump would be dangerous as president would loom over his time as Secretary of State. It would be reported on every time he showed up in a foreign capital. That being said, Trump and Romney reportedly had good chemistry, and he could be the one that Trump settles on in the end. Melissa?
Yeah, we've also heard General Petraeus, of course, Ambassador John Bolton's name being tossed around. What about those two?
Well, unfortunately for General Petraeus, when Trump settled on General John Kelly for Homeland Security, choosing Petraeus for state would have made his cabinet look a bit too much like a junta, too many four-star generals. On the other hand, Trump really likes Petraeus, and I would not be surprised if they still try to find something for him. They spoke for over an hour the other day, and Trump, I'm told, was very impressed with Petraeus' knowledge. In terms of Ambassador John Bolton, I'm told, and my colleague John Roberts first reported this last week, that Bolton is being considered for the #2 position at state. And lastly, don't forget about Senator Bob Corker. He would be an easy confirmation, I'm told. And finally, Ford CEO Alan Mulally, he's still being considered for the top spot, that according to Kellyanne Conway on the morning shows today. Back to you.
Wow, that's a lot. Jennifer, great job. Great to see you. Thanks.
Sure is. For more on this, now we're going to bring in Chris Wallace, anchor at Fox News Sunday. And Chris, good day to you. Getting ready for your big exclusive with the president-elect that we'll see on Sunday. I'll talk about that in a moment. How are you, Chris? Good morning to you. That's first thing
I'm good.
Second thing, Reuters has something crossing right now. I'm just going to read this to you, okay? The White House Homeland Security Advisor, Lisa Monaco, is saying that President Obama has now directed a full review of the intelligence community to conduct on the cyber attacks that either did or did not happen on the 2016 election, and that report will be out before he leaves office. So that's pretty quick time now. I mean, does that suggest there is something to this now, Chris?
Well, we've had reports for weeks before the election that the intelligence community absolutely believed that Russia was behind the cyber attacks, the hacking of the DNC, and perhaps the hacking of John Podesta's private email file. Look, there was somebody, or maybe it was several sources, were involved in a real effort to affect this election. When you think about it, hacking a political party, hacking a political campaign of one of the two nominees, and especially if it's a foreign actor like Russia, that raises serious questions of national security and an effort to destabilize the essence of our democratic system. Interestingly enough, it's not just President Obama who's acting. There's a front-page story in the Washington Post today that top Republicans in the Senate are also talking about launching a full-scale investigation to get to the bottom of this. You know, if you'd done it in the middle of the campaign, it might have seemed highly political. But now, afterwards, to find out just how many Russian fingerprints there were on this effort, it strikes me as an utterly responsible thing to do.
All right, next topic now is cabinet picks, the ones we know about, the ones we do not know about, when Kellyanne Conway said this earlier today.
Everybody has such a different resume, and they all have to have the same perspective, though. You have to be able to adhere to what will be the Trump doctrine worldwide and be willing to execute on his vision. A very diverse group: John Bolton, Dana Rohrabacher. I think this is a tremendous process because you can't rush through such an important selection.
All right, so the names there with Bolton and Rohrabacher, that's in reference to potential positions at the State Department. What is your sense about how this team is coming together? If you were to characterize it one way, what do you think?
Well, let's leave Secretary of State out, because clearly the president-elect has not settled on someone. And, you know, he shows no problems at all once he's satisfied somebody is the right person for the job and naming him very quickly. Think of James Mattis at Defense. He clearly doesn't have a person yet that he is comfortable with as the head of diplomacy at the State Department, and until he does, they're all contenders. In terms of his overall cabinet, what's interesting is the degree to which he's picking people who are going to dramatically reverse exactly what those agencies have done over the last 8 years under President Obama. You think of Scott Pruitt, the Oklahoma Attorney General, as head of EPA. This is a guy who has been suing EPA, trying to fight the Obama regulations. You think of Andy Puzder, the fast food magnate, who's going to be the Secretary of Labor. He is directly opposed to Obama's idea about a big increase in the minimum wage, the Obama ideas about expanding the number of people who are going to get overtime. And Tom Price at HHS, he's one of the architects, one of the leaders of the Republican effort to repeal and replace Obamacare. So he's going to have people in charge of the very departments doing exactly the opposite of what those departments are doing under Barack Obama.
I think you hit the nail on the head. That is precisely what's developing here. Last time you saw Trump in person, was it at the debate in Las Vegas, October 19th?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
So you see...
And that went pretty well.
It sure did. Thank you for that. You meet with him tomorrow, is my understanding. Is that right?
I'm flying up to Trump Tower tomorrow morning. Going to sit down, have an extensive interview with him. Really his first sit-down, extensive interview since he's made all of these decisions. So I've got a ton of questions to ask him. Then we continue the interview on Trump Force One as we head down to Baltimore, where he is going to be making his unofficial debut as the commander-in-chief at the Army-Navy game, and we'll be with the president-elect there.
So he's given you a lot. To brass. Yeah, he's giving you a lot of time. I mean, that sounds like several hours worth. And given that, Chris,
you'll spend several hours with me. I'm not bad company.
I love being around you. If the walls could talk. Is there an area of his decision-making, I don't know how much you want to reveal right now, but we're going to talk about tomorrow. Is there an area of his decision-making that has you the most curious? Perhaps that's the question.
Yeah, I mean, there are obvious areas. You know, we're going to talk about intervention in some private affairs. Obviously, we'll talk about the Taiwan call. But I think the thing that is most striking to me in all of this is how much he, and in fact, we're going to call the show The Trump Way, because he is doing things differently than any president-elect ever has. In some ways, he's acting like the president already. And to some degree, it seems like he's more relevant to what's going on in the country than Barack Obama is. And I want to get a sense from him of why he's doing it and the degree to which he is going to continue to break the mold once he actually formally raises his hand, takes the oath of office, and becomes president. This is different. I've been covering presidential transitions since 1980, and I have never seen anything like these last month plus. And I just got to assume it's going to continue for the next 4 years or potentially 8 years. And I want to get a sense of his thinking about it.
Great stuff. Really looking forward to it. Is Joe Biden going to that game? Is Barack Obama going? Because
I know the president is.
Yeah, but Trump's going to split.
About Joe Biden, but I will tell you that as far as most people are going to be concerned, I suspect they're going to think the commander-in-chief is Donald J. Trump.
I agree with that. You're exactly right. Looking forward to it. Well done, Chris. We'll see you Sunday, okay?
You bet.
Check him out, Mr. Sunday right there today. So he spends half the time with the Army, half the time with the Navy on Saturday in Baltimore, Maryland. The Trump way. That's Wallace's take on it.
I can't wait to see that. That's going to be amazing. I think I might watch it twice, in fact.
Okay.
Why not? All right, Donald Trump laying down the law for China.
They haven't played by the rules, and I know it's time that they're going to start. They're going to start. They've got to. We're all in this thing together, folks. We got to play by the rules, folks.
Mr. Trump saying Beijing better play ball once he's president. Congressman Adam Kitzinger is here with his take on how Trump's policy might play out.
Also, Hillary Clinton making a statement about fake news in America. What does she mean by that comment? Is it a reflection on the election? We'll debate it in a moment. Sweet. Officer Jody Smith died of injuries yesterday, and his friend, Officer Nicholas Smarr, died the day before. What a loss. Fellow officers say the two had graduated from high school and the police academy together. They say Officer Smith heard his friend needed backup and rushed to the scene to help him. The suspect, Minquel Lembrick, killed himself yesterday. This after a long-standing manhunt. He apparently barricaded himself inside of a home. He is now dead.
They haven't played by the rules, and I know it's time that they're going to start. You have the massive theft of intellectual property, putting unfair taxes on our companies, not helping with the menace of North Korea like they should, and the at-will and massive devaluation of their currency and product dumping. Other than that, they've been wonderful, right?
All right, President-elect Trump laying into China there, insisting they will play by the rules with Terry Branstad as ambassador. He brought out the Iowa governor during last night's rally. Branstad will have his hands full, that is for sure. The Chinese are already upset over Mr. Trump's phone call with the leader of Taiwan. I'm joined now by Congressman Adam Kinzinger. He is a Republican from Illinois. He's a pilot in the Air National Guard. Sir, thank you so much for joining us. Just to start with, I think a lot of people out there when they made the announcement didn't realize that Governor Branstad has a 3-decade-long relationship with the Chinese president. It started when the Chinese president came to the U.S. on an agricultural mission. And obviously, you know, that's something that this governor knows a lot about. What do you think about this pick?
I think it's great. I think, you know, the depth of understanding of China, I think he has a great understanding of just foreign affairs and the role of the United States. And, you know, being a governor, you've learned how to deal with, you know, the bureaucracy of state. You learn how to deal with diplomatic relationships. And the other thing is, you know, it's obviously an ag state, too, an agricultural state, which is extremely important to our export and our trade. And so I'm excited. You know, it's a long line of, I think, very good picks so far.
And it shows you that this is probably a very high priority for Donald Trump. I mean, he talked about China and the relationship and how unbalanced it was so many times on the campaign trail. He picked someone that had the relationship and he thought was going to go in and be very effective. Do you think he's playing a little good cop, bad cop here? Because he does things like talking to the president of Taiwan, which is, you know, I think something to tweak China a little bit, but then he sends somebody in there that they have an extended relationship with. What do you think of that analysis?
I think it's good cop, bad cop, maybe, but I also think it's just a case of, hey, there's a new sheriff in town. And it's the, you know, I mean, it's ridiculous when a Taiwanese military officer or soldier comes to the United States to train. So if they're in Air War College, for instance, they're not allowed to wear their uniform in the United States. So they can be sitting in a classroom with all our allied nations in their uniforms, but they're in a suit. So some of that 1979 kind of arcane policy, I think President-elect Trump is saying, hey, we're going to put China on notice. You want to build fake islands out in the middle of the water and claim they're yours and claim the territorial water around them? That's cool. We're going to rebuild our relationship with Taiwan. And so it's a little bit of, hey, there's a new sheriff in town. We're not going to be push-arounds anymore. We hope to get along, but don't think you can just march all over us like you've been doing.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people don't realize that we've sold arms to Taiwan. We are contractually obliged to protect them if need be militarily. In the meantime, like you said, Donald Trump sounding like the new sheriff in town, and the Chinese media responding, saying, quote, the Chinese government has shown much restraint in responding to Trump's erratic behavior in a hope to have a smooth start with the next U.S. administration. After all, China-U.S. relations is just too important to be ruined by one incident. But Trump and some of his advisors need to understand that the Taiwan question is not something to be flirted with. That was Friday's China Daily. What's your reaction to that salvo?
Well, first off, China's not going to tell us what to do anymore. I think that's an important point to note. Second off, hey, China, I understand your concern there. Why don't you start doing something about North Korea? Really, the only country that North Korea has a strong relationship with is China. They have a tremendous amount of leverage. So, look, I agree. This isn't something you come into willy-nilly and just start throwing bombs and just saying whatever, because it is a sensitive relationship and it's a very important relationship. But it is also essential that we come in and say, look, just because you're a powerful economy, not as powerful as ours, doesn't mean that we have to allow you to exert your hegemony in areas where our allies exist. So yeah. I think this is the beginning of us kind of pushing back and saying, yeah, not so quickly.
Meanwhile, I mean, the Chinese saying that behavior is dangerous, folks on the left saying Trump's behavior is dangerous. What are the odds in your mind that it's dangerous?
Look, I think he's got great people around him that understand the effect of this. I don't think a call to Taiwan is going to lead to an invasion of Taiwan. I think China knows better. Look, the folks on the left, I mean, they've had a policy for the last 8 years of, in essence, Chinese appeasement and worldwide withdrawal. So this is the opposite of that, so it's going to catch a lot of them in an uncomfortable situation. But, again, we have a new president. The American people said we want a new direction on foreign policy and the economy, and I'm excited about working with them out here.
Yeah. Make no mistake, there is a new sheriff in town, no doubt. Congressman, thank you for joining us. Have a great weekend.
You too. Take care.
So immigration was a big topic again last night. The thank you tour in Iowa this time brought up Mr. Trump's promise to suspend immigration from some countries and to keep terrorists off American soil. You know what he calls it? Extreme vetting. In a moment, will it work?
You know, I've used the expression extreme vetting. Extreme. Oh, it's got to be extreme.
House Speaker Paul Ryan meeting with President-elect Trump right now at Trump Tower. He spoke to reporters a few moments ago. Listen.
Very exciting meeting. I really enjoyed coming up here, meeting with the President-elect. We had a great meeting to talk about our transition. We're very excited about getting to work and hitting the ground running in 2017 to put this country back on track. Thanks, guys.
Lots of comings and goings these days from Trump Tower, as you can imagine. Well, Mr. Trump has tapped several people for his cabinet. We are still waiting on a few positions, including Secretary of State.
All pre-start dial lights are correct. The ready light is on. Eject Murphy umbilical. Godspeed, John Glenn. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Roger, the clock is operating. We're underway. You're loud and clear. Roger, we're programming and roll okay.
Perhaps no one had more of the right stuff than John Glenn, an American hero that we remember, who we remember today. Former NASA astronaut, senior advisor at the Intrepid Museum, and engineering professor at Columbia, Mike Massimino, back with us, our favorite astronaut here on Earth. How you doing, brother?
Thanks,
nice to see you. Your new book is called Spaceman. You've got a lot of information here about Senator Glenn.
Yes.
Tell us what you want the audience to understand about this American hero.
I think, Bill, I think he's the real deal. You know, we admire people, and sometimes we get a chance to meet them, and occasionally they don't live up to what you might expect. But in the case of Senator Glenn, he exceeded that. He was just a true American hero, a great man, a good friend, a good family man, a patriot. Just what you would expect, what you would hope in a great American hero. He truly embodied that, and it wasn't just what you saw in the media. That's who that man was, and it was it was just an honor to get a chance to meet him and know him a little bit.
As a fellow Buckeye, when you grow up and you know that John Glenn and Neil Armstrong are from Ohio,
yes.
You hang on to their stories for a lifetime.
Yeah.
That's the way I feel about it.
Yeah.
Question for you. What was the bigger challenge, going into space in the 1960s, the way he did it as a pioneer, or going back to space at age 77?
I think for what he did, his first flight was so historic and so new and so dangerous. To have him do that, I think that was probably the bigger challenge technologically and just unknown.
But physically?
Well, physically, he came back at age 77 and was in pretty good shape. He'd come to the gym. We'd see him in the gym every day. And he was really fit. He was always moving. And I think that was his, the way he looked at life, to always keep moving. He was always walking, running, lifting weights, whatever he could at age 77. I think physically, though, to do that at age 70, because you kind of get beat up a bit as an astronaut. It's a lot of training. They do things to you that aren't necessarily pleasant. And he was able to withstand all of that. He was a Marine. That's another thing. He was able to put up with it, never complained. His crewmates, I didn't get to fly in space with him, but his crewmates told me that he never complained about anything.
I think one of the more tender aspects of his life is the relationship he had with his wife, Annie.
Yeah.
Married 73 years, and they knew each other when they were the youngest of young ages in
They were in
Ohio.
the same crib together. They used to play in the same playpen together. Families knew each other. I was lucky enough as a new astronaut. I was only an astronaut for about 2 years when he flew in space, and I was asked with another astronaut to be his family escort for that flight. So I got to know Senator Glenn and Annie and their children and grandchildren fairly well. And what really amazed me, I can't even think of another couple that were closer that I've met. They were a true partnership, and she was really involved. She would go to the briefings with him to learn about what he was going to do on the mission. She was totally involved, totally supportive. You could tell the friendship they had between them was very, very special, and that was really unique. Again, it's something that you might have heard about in the press, but to actually get to see it between these two people before
True
the
love,
launch,
right?
It really was a real partnership between the two of them.
I know you consider the endorsement he gave on your book just recently to be very
I was really thrilled that he agreed to do that, to write an endorsement that's on the back of the book. I'm very honored to have it there, and very happy I had it. Very sad to have him go, but we're really lucky we had him, and it's a life to emulate.
Movie star looks with a life story to match. That was John Glenn.
Yes, a very interesting life.
Merry
Great hero.
Christmas to you.
Thanks for having me,
Hope to see you before the big day, okay?
Yes, great. All right.
Melissa.
Meanwhile, Hillary Clinton speaking out on a hot-button issue.
It's now clear that so-called fake news can have real-world consequences.
Wow, so was she talking about the gunman in the pizza parlor fired up by fake news? Was it more about the election going to Donald Trump? We're going to debate it fair and balanced.
Also,
Defense Secretary Ash Carter making a surprise visit to Afghanistan amid growing concerns over the Taliban's influence in the country. It's expected to be Carter's final visit there before handing over the job to his successor. But still, the secretary is renewing U.S. commitments to keep that country safe. Currently, about 10,000 American troops are in Afghanistan.
Intriguing story here. Hillary Clinton now calling on Congress to take action against so-called fake news. She made the comment during a goodbye ceremony for Harry Reid's retirement celebration. Interesting, nonetheless. Want to bring in Kristen Soltis-Anderson, columnist for the Washington Examiner, Republican pollster, and author of The Selfie Vote, and Marjorie Clifton, former consultant to the Obama team and a principal at Clifton Consultant. Ladies, good Friday to both of you. It's an intriguing topic here. Let's see how you manage it. Here is the comment, and then we'll go ahead and interpret and debate the following from yesterday.
So-called fake news can have real-world consequences. This isn't about politics or partisanship. Lives are at risk. Lives of ordinary people just trying to go about their days, to do their jobs. It's imperative that leaders in both the private sector and the public sector step up to protect our democracy and innocent lives.
There have been multiple interpretations of that. Kristen, what's yours? Start.
fake news is a symptom of a serious problem. It's not something that I think Congress needs to be passing a bunch of bills to deal with. It's not the reason why Hillary Clinton lost the election. There's been a lot of focus lately on the spread of fake news and the extent to which it affected the election. But frankly, I think the problem that we have with fake news is because people are willing to look at an article that comes from a New York Times and an article that comes from a website set up by a Macedonian teenager, and they're unwilling to say that they think one is more credible than the other. That's as much a problem that the mainstream media has created and allowed to be created as anything. Not something that needs to be legislated
Kristen, some are suggesting that she's using the fake news as an excuse for the loss. Did you hear that in her comment or not?
Not in that comment specifically, but certainly last week I was up at Harvard for that campaign managers conference where, the Clinton team had a lot of reasons for why they thought Hillary Clinton lost the election, none of which were that Hillary Clinton didn't have a message that resonated with voters. I think this is something that, again, it's serious. It's definitely troubling if people are going on Facebook and seeing things that are untrue and bringing firearms to pizza parlors, etc. That's not good.
Okay, so
it's also not why Hillary Clinton lost.
Maybe it's good she's bringing attention to it then. Margie, what is your take when you heard her comment about that?
Well, the Pizzagate issue, which was accusing she and a lot of people in her campaign of pedophilia and human trafficking, was a pretty grave and personal accusation. And so I think this hit home. And actually, that was a pizza joint that was blocks away from my home, formerly in Washington, D.C., in a place that I, used to bring kids to hang out. So it was a pretty jarring thing and very personal to a lot of people in the D.C. community. So I think, her bringing this up not only has to do with the election, but with something that I am hearing in the business community.
You do believe it has something to do with the election?
Well, it has everything to do with how we do our democracy. Media, began and still is a very important part of informing voters, of helping people understand the issues. And I am hearing, again, across the aisle in all communities, a question even coming from journalists about what do we believe, what's real and what's not. Because it is very hard, even for the discerning and very educated eye, to understand, and people in the media, I mean, in terms of their education.
When it comes to the election, she never campaigned in Wisconsin. She pretty much blew off Michigan.
Well, look, I'm not debating, the credibility of her message or what she said or what resonated with voters. I'm just saying that news and what's real and what's not impacts not her, but also Donald Trump. There was plenty of misinformation on both sides of the aisle, and I think helping people understand what's real and what's not and making accusations, especially something as grave as pedophilia, has real impacts because it resulted in a gunman showing up in a restaurant.
I get it. Kristen, maybe you can take this one on. Why make this comment at Harry Reid's retirement party? Is it a little incongruous or not?
There were a lot of conservatives yesterday who thought that it was, I guess, ironic might be the word, given that I think 4 years ago, Harry Reid was a big proponent of the idea that Mitt Romney had lied in his taxes and, sort of insinuating all of these bad things about Romney. I don't necessarily call that fake news because I think fake news is a term people are now ascribing to anything that they think is misleading in the media. But certainly, it seems like an odd venue for it. But certainly she had a public platform, a microphone, and this has become increasingly something that folks on the left think is why she didn't win the election, Marjorie, and I just disagree with that.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you here, but just last comment from Marjorie on that. I mean, what Kristen says, the irony of the discussion about fake news in America at the ceremony for Harry Reid, who just went out there on the floor of the Senate and blasted Mitt Romney, accusing him of not paying taxes 4 years ago. There's a rich irony in that.
Well, there's also there's a scale. So, accusing someone of pedophilia and then politicking around. There was a whole birther movement for Obama.
It's all wrong.
Yes, it's all wrong. And so I think the point is, and I agree with Kristen, this is a platform, and it's also an issue of the day, and it's becoming more and more relevant and important, especially as we go into a new presidency where we need to be able to legislate, we need to be able to move things along, and if the general public is completely confused about what's real, what's not, that's a real problem. We can't vote, we can't be informed, and we can't act.
Ladies, thanks to both of you. Appreciate the analysis, we shall say. Kristen, thanks. Marjorie, thanks to you in Texas.
Political turmoil in South Korea as lawmakers impeach their first female president, officially stripping the embattled leader of her powers. The decision comes as prosecutors are accusing the president of extortion. Kitty Logan is live from our London bureau with the latest on this one. Wow, quite a story, Kitty.
Yes, Melissa. Well, that impeachment sparked by the corruption scandal you mentioned, but also there have been weeks of protests of people calling for President Park to step down. Now, today, an overwhelming majority of lawmakers voted in Parliament to impeach her. That motion passed 234 to 56, 60 from Park's own political party voting against her. And now the Constitutional Court has to decide whether to uphold that vote. Could take up to 6 months to do that, but it does now seem likely President Park is to be the first South Korean leader to be forced out of office. She had been due to stay on for another 2 years, of course. Now, she's accused, as we said, of collaborating with a close aide who is facing corruption allegations. Now, Park denies any wrongdoing, but says she accepts Parliament's decision today and has apologised for what she describes as carelessness. Now, President Park has become South Korea's most unpopular leader in recent history, her approval rating sinking to just 5%, with thousands holding candlelit rallies every weekend to protest against her leadership. Now, today, Prime Minister Hwang Ko-an takes over as interim president, but there are, of course, concerns in the region about the impact of political instability in South Korea at a time of heightened tensions with the North. Now, if that Constitutional Court approves President Park's impeachment, there would have to be a new leadership election held within 2 months, Melissa.
Wow, Kitty. All right, thank you for that report. We'll keep an eye on that story.
So he ran the table at his rally last night in Iowa. This was Trump's greatest hits. Firing up supporters on the wall, extreme vetting, and a lot more. So how then might extreme vetting work? That's next.
One of my first executive orders will be to ask the Department of Labor to investigate all visa abuses that undermine jobs and wages for the American worker, to protect our country from terrorism and extremism.
It is fascinating to listen to some of the things that you have said and read some of your own writing. One quote that caught me from something that you said to our own Sean Hannity, you were talking about waterboarding, which is something that you have done firsthand. You said, as it went on, they turned on the charm. It was easier to work with them. In the beginning, the thing that was like it, because it was shocking, but I was surprised at their indifference to the violence and death of other people around them. Their indifference to the violence and the death around them. Talk to me about that.
Well, I will talk to you about it. You know, one of the recent quotes that I heard President Obama say is that more people are killed by bathtubs every year than terrorists. And so far as I know, bathtubs aren't trying to hunt us down and kill us. They're not trying to set off nuclear weapons or crock-pot bombs. And the thing that I learned from dealing with the top terrorists that I dealt with, and that's all I dealt with men like Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and Ramzi bin Ashiba and Abu Zubaydah, is they're completely indifferent to our deaths. And in fact, our deaths are required for them to purify the earth so that they can spread Sharia law.
You say, we think we understand them, but we don't understand them. What does that mean?
That means that my impression from having talked with many Americans about this is that we think they don't believe what they say they believe. We think they don't mean what they say they mean. You know, one of the things that I hear all the time is that these terror attacks have nothing to do with Islam. Well, it does, and here's what I mean by that. Maybe in the World Trade Center, when that was hit by those airplanes, there were people in the World Trade Center who believed that the attack on the USS Cole, which killed 17 Americans by Al-Qaeda in 2000, had nothing to do with Islam. But in the minds of those men who flew those planes into that building, it had everything to do with Islam. And so we need to quit thinking about how victims feel and start thinking about how the people who are attacking you feel.
I ask you, with your experience firsthand doing waterboarding, you know, people that are against that a lot of times say the reason why they are is because it doesn't produce good information. That when you're torturing someone and they don't want to get hurt any longer, that they'll say anything to make it stop. What makes you think that the information that you get is reliable?
were two things. First off, you could do what you suggested, right? You could do it in such a way that you led people to do false confessions. Confessions were not something the CIA was interested in. And you could do it in a way that would get them to say anything you wanted to hear by asking them leading questions. But that's not what the CIA did. The other part about this thing that's important to remember is that we never expected to get intelligence while they were being waterboarded. What we expected is that as they approached the next session, that's when they would start trying to provide us with enough information that they could avoid the waterboard. And once they did that, we very quickly moved into social influence kinds of things, similar to what law enforcement does or what a psychologist would do to get a patient who was reluctant to talk, to deal with a topic they didn't want to talk to. So it is true that waterboarding by itself is not a silver bullet. It can be done badly, or it can be done in a way that is useful.
So when you hear Donald Trump going back and forth talking about whether or not it should be used now, what do you think? What do you think he should do?
Well, I think good luck with that. As the person who waterboarded everyone that was officially waterboarded in the CIA's interrogation program, asking intelligence officers to step up and do that after the way we've been savaged by the Obama administration, I think it's a tough road to hoe. But having said that, I would say that the Army Field Manual is not enough. You know, a man like KSM, the worst of the worst, who has an attack in the works and is hardened, very hardcore, and is intent on protecting those secrets, that guy's not going to talk because you give him a beer and a pack of cigarettes, or you use the Army Field Manual. Not going to happen.
Yeah, it sounds like you feel like it's something that you need to do when you're doing it. Interesting stuff. Dr. James Mitchell, thanks for joining us. Appreciate your time.
No, thank you for having me on.
Oh, what a book. Intriguing. John Scott's coming up next and Happening Now. What you working on, John? Happy Friday to you,
Happy
sir.
Friday to you, Bill. Transition watch as we get new insight into President-elect Trump's thinking on the Secretary of State position. Hillary Clinton back in the public eye, warning about the rise of so-called fake news. Our media panel weighs in. And marking the death of an American hero, John Glenn, remembered today. It's all ahead. Happening Now.
Good deal. See you in 10 minutes. Thank you, John.
See you, Bill.
Holiday shopping season now in full force. Some of America's...
Time for the Democrats to stop the blame game.
White supremacy, scapegoating, Jim Comey, Russian interference, fake news. Bernie Sanders, he had the audacity to run. Why did he do that? How about he won 22 states and 13 million voters, and they never fully assimilated him back in? And then anytime I respond, anytime I defend myself against these specious allegations that are now leading to death threats, so I really resent it. Anytime I try to respond, I'm seen as ungracious. Why are we sore winners? I'm not a sore winner. I'm a winner. My guy's a winner. He's an ex-president of the United States. This has to stop, Chris. This incendiary rhetoric of people who just can't admit that they lost. It has to stop because it's costing a lot of angst.
Whew. Juan Williams is a Fox News political analyst and author of We the People. Mercedes Schlapp is a former media spokeswoman for President George W. Bush and a Fox News contributor. Juan, let me start with you. I mean, it strikes me when I watch these sound bites that you really have to get up for the fight in a campaign. You have to eat, drink, sleep, all of it. And it's hard to turn it off when it's over. Is that some of what we're seeing, do you think?
No, I think this goes way beyond that. I think the acrimony is at fever pitch here, and it's a stunner because I think it's just the nature of this specific campaign. I've covered a lot of campaigns, Melissa, and you do have some backbiting and finger pointing afterwards, oftentimes inside the tent, especially among the losers. But here you see Jennifer Palmieri, communications director for Hillary Clinton's campaign, still saying that, and we saw this up at Harvard, we see it now in the op-ed, that the Trump campaign really did run a racist campaign, and quoting David Duke as saying we didn't have a platform until Trump came along. On the other hand, as you just saw, Kellyanne Conway saying that's not the reason you guys lost, and why don't you own up to it and realize you didn't have a good candidate, you didn't have a good message. And I think it's very personal at this point between these two campaigns.
Yeah, it is absolutely very personal. But Mercedes, every time I turn on the television, other than Kellyanne Conway, I see Republicans rejoicing that they think Democrats don't get why they lost. And Nancy Pelosi keeps her seat, and it's sort of like Republicans believe that Democrats didn't learn the lesson, so they're still at the advantage.
I absolutely agree with you, Melissa. I think that for the most part, when you have Nancy Pelosi coming out and saying that they don't think that the Democratic Party needs to go in a new direction, and actually it was Joe Biden who made it very clear and said it was the Democrats' fault for not connecting to the white working class. We have to remember that it was the white working class who voted for President Obama 2 times, and then many of them switched their votes over to Donald Trump because of Donald Trump's economic message. I mean, it's very clear. And I understand where Kellyanne Conway is coming from. It's become personal because at the end of the day, this campaign ran on the fact that they wanted to give a voice to the American worker. And that is exactly what the Trump campaign has done. And that is what and they really had a brilliant political strategy, focusing on those Rust Belt states. And if the Clintons can't realize, and the Clinton campaign can't realize that they had a failed political strategy, and they're going to get stuck on this name calling, then they are the sore loser.
Okay. Juan, you know, I was talking to Byron York before the election. I hope he doesn't get mad at me for telling this story out of turn. But he was saying, you know, when it looked like Republicans were going to lose, that in the day after, you have 2 choices. You know, you can either blame the messenger and say we just didn't get our message across, it's the damn media, you know, and you can blame all these other things. Or you can do some serious soul searching about why your opinions and your ideals didn't capture the minds of enough voters out there. Do you think that Democrats are at all missing the boat by not doing enough soul searching?
Oh, I don't think there's any lack of soul searching. I think when we saw, for example, Tim Ryan, the congressman from Ohio, speak up and say, you know, he won his district even as Trump won his district, and the Democrats need to do a better job not only of speaking to white blue-collar workers, but also to Southern voters where Democrats don't have any traction. I think that was evidence of the kind of introspection. You know, when you hear Mercedes talk about Joe Biden saying much the same thing, I think you understand it reaches to the White House. President Obama saying. I think that it's just, you know, the difference I have with Mercedes on this point is that I think you can have 2 ideas in mind at the same time. I think when people look back on Trump and think about how he gained traction initially with the birther controversy, his comments about Mexicans, his comments about Muslims, and even lately the flag burning, you understand he makes highly provocative comments that appeal to people who have previously been at the far edges of American society because of their radical and at times racist views.
Mercedes, I'll let you respond to that directly.
Well, what I find is that there's millions of Americans who supported Donald Trump, that every time the left calls us racist, calls us sexist for supporting Donald Trump, it's an indictment on these voters. And so I feel for the Democrats to stay on this obsession with the name calling. I think it does them a disservice. At the end of the day, when individuals went out to the voting booth in these battleground states and they decided that it was Donald Trump who they wanted to be the one to help create jobs in America, to help push forward a strong national security message, he won. And so I think for the Democrats, it's time for them to look into their own party and see where they're going to make fundamental change. Because what's happening is that party is becoming just kind of an old and tired party.
Juan and Mercedes, thank you so much. That was relatively polite. I mean, you guys did much better than the campaign, so I thank you for that.
Well, have a great Christmas weekend.
Thank you. See you later.
I think you're just tired on a Friday. Come on, spark up. So now better news out of fire-stricken Tennessee, a resort town now ready to reopen to the public. The roadways in the Gatlinburg are set to reopen. These raging wildfires, and look at these pictures too, sweeping through that small town. Wow. At the foot of the Great Smoky Mountains last week, 14 people killed, 190 injured, 2,500 buildings had damage. It's just remarkable, the devastation. 2 teenagers have been charged with starting the fire, so we're going to keep an eye on that story as it works its way through the legal system. Strong consequences if that's the case.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Donald Trump's choice for Secretary of State turning into the ultimate guessing game, right? So who has the inside track? We're going to talk to Chris Wallace as he gets ready for his exclusive interview with Mr. Trump for Fox News Sunday.
Also, we are now getting our first indication as to how many ISIS fighters have been killed in Iraq and Syria. 50,000. That's the figure according to a senior U.S. military official. I want to bring in Michael Waltz now, former Green Beret commander, former counterterror advisor to Vice President Dick Cheney, author of the book Warrior Diplomat, and a Fox News contributor. Michael, good morning to you and welcome back here on American.
Hey, good morning, Bill.
It's a big number. Do you believe it?
Yeah, it is a large number, but it makes sense to me, and I don't have any reason to doubt that coming from the Pentagon. Look, Bill, we've been conducting airstrikes now for several years, over 16,000 by the Pentagon's latest count, and we've had multiple defense and intelligence officials testify that ISIS has been sending as many as 1,500 fighters per month over the last several years into Iraq and Syria. So I'm glad we've killed a lot of them, but I think there's more behind that number and still a lot of work to be done.
So on that question, then, how many more? I mean, if you've killed 50,000,
right?
How many more are there, Michael?
Well, you know, and that 50,000 also includes, and that 1,500 per month being pumped in from North Africa and the rest of the world is on top of the local Iraq and Syrian fighters that are also supporting ISIS. So, you know, who knows how many is behind that number. You know, at the end of the day, my kind of definition of victory is when the enemy can't recruit anymore because we've dismantled their ideology and their leadership.
13 months ago, the recruiting into that part of the world, the resupplying, you could say also, of fighters, it was a big deal during the attacks in Paris. Can you say, or how can you characterize today that level of recruitment? Is it still 15,000? Is it more? Is it less? Has the line of supply been cut off in any way?
Well, I think we've done a good job across you know, the military and the interagency of cutting some of those supply lines, feeding into Iraq and Syria. But ISIS has also shifted its strategy and gone to more of a franchise model, where they have you know, kind of franchises, so to speak, in Libya, in different parts of the Middle East, in Afghanistan continues to grow. We can't forget the war that is still ongoing over there. So, you know, I think ISIS has taken more of a kind of a diffuse model and not concentrated quite so much. And we're going to see them moving from holding territory and large cities to an insurgency where they're going to be, you know, go back to kind of a guerrilla model that's going to upend whoever is going to govern parts of Iraq and Syria after this.
You mentioned Libya. I mean, Yemen's a big deal. Northern Africa. You think about Nigeria, too, and Boko Haram and the problems there. What is the long-term strategy, as you would state it now?
Well, that's, you know, in my mind, the big question, right? And if you look at Mosul in northern Iraq, you have Iranian-backed Shia militias, you have Turkish-backed Sunni militias, you have the Kurds, all loosely cooperating with the Iraqi army in kind of a land grab. You know, what they're interested in is oil, gas, and being in a position of strength after all of this is done and after ISIS is kicked out. It's kind of like the British, the Americans, and the Soviets at the end of World War II racing towards Berlin so that they can grab as much land as possible, and then the negotiation begins. And that's the part that really has me worried, you know, and that I'm looking at the Trump administration for what is that long-term strategy? How are we going to govern, and how are we going to defeat the new ISIS insurgents?
Based on what you've heard, based on the appointments, based on the expected nominations, how do you think a Trump administration would handle it?
Well, I think we have to, one, we have to begin taking on Iran and Iran's influence. And I think you're certainly going to see that from General Mattis and General Mike Flynn, who have been very vocal and, in fact, were kind of eased out of the Obama administration for you know, taking on Iran's use of proxies to dominate the Middle East. So I think that needs to be priority one. And, of course, along with still defeating ISIS in its caliphate. But, you know, how do you reconcile those two is going to be quite a trick. And I'm interested to see what comes out of the administration.
It's going to be a big deal. Colonel, thank you. Lieutenant Colonel Michael Waltz back with us today out of Washington. Nice to have you back. Thanks.
Thanks so much.
Donald Trump going after China again, saying that they don't play by the rules. So what's his plan? Plus, training ordinary citizens to act as first responders, how it could help victims of attacks like the one at Ohio State.
These were really brave people, amazing people. The police and first responders were incredible. The job done in particular by one young gentleman was incredible. And I got to meet him, and he was very brave.